Okay, so we've got the mash water up to 70 degrees Celsius, and so I've added 2 pounds of 2-row malt, and so now we're just going to stir that up a bit to make sure that we don't get any clumps. Kind of sort of the texture of really runny oatmeal, which kind of makes sense. It's a grain, not unlike oats. Alright, I think we're good. So we can put the lid on that, and we'll be back to that shortly once it's had a chance to steep. Okay, so these have been cooking basically, or at least sitting in hot water for an hour in total. Timer set for 50 minutes with no heat, and then had the heat on for probably about 5 minutes or so, and then turned it off because it was actually getting a bit hotter than I wanted. Because you want the temperature for the grains for the last 10 minutes to be a little bit above 70 degrees, so about 75 Celsius or so. So the idea is that now we drain the grains through this, so it's basically a colander lined with cheesecloth. If you've got a strainer that has smaller holes than my colander, then you could probably get away with that. I might even be able to get away without the cheesecloth, but I figured this should contribute to a slightly clearer beer. Won't have as much floaties in it. Anyway, so I'm gonna drain the grains, and then we're gonna start sparging. Okay, so I've got the grains into the colander. It's a good thing I have a big one, because 2 pounds of grain expands even more than I had expected, so luckily I've got lots of capacity in this thing. If you were doing a larger batch of beer, this would obviously be far too small, but luckily since I'm only doing 1 gallon, this is fine. So the idea is that you want to very slowly pour water over the grains, like so. And what you're doing is rinsing off the grains. The idea is that you want to get as much of the fermentable sugars out of the grains as possible. So this water should be at or pretty close to your mash temperature, so around 70 degrees Celsius. I'm probably not doing this terribly evenly. The pros use what's called a sparge arm, which is basically like a rotating spraying arm that goes back and forth and sprinkles water over it very slowly at just the right temperature, but obviously that's a little more high-tech than what I've got going on today. Now, once I'm done sparging, there's a bit of debate online about whether or not to press your grains. The recipe I have doesn't specify one way or the other. Some people say do it because you get more wort out, and also you get the extra bit of sugars. Other people say don't do it because you get excess tannins from the grains. I'm not sure which is correct, or if there is a correct answer. My thought is, though, that because my container is just over 1 gallon, and I'm already a little concerned about whether or not I'm going to have enough, or if I'm going to have too much wort, rather. So I'm thinking what I might do is err on the side of caution and not press the grains this time, and just sort of see how it comes out, and maybe try that another time. Okay, so I've got the grains drained into this pot. It's the biggest pot I own, and it's a little more than half full. So yeah, it's a good thing I'm only doing 1 gallon. So I ended up having to take the colander out and hold it up for a bit to get the grains completely drained, and actually I was holding it on a bit of an angle at one point. I guess I kind of split the difference with the whole pressing the grains. The weight of them was probably pressing the bottom ones a little bit, but I didn't mechanically push it down, like I didn't use a spoon or anything like that. So anyway, so now we just need to bring this to the boil, and then we can start adding the hops, and in about 90 minutes from when the boil starts, we will have a wort. Well, we've got the wort boiling away. Of course, it's sort of my habit to clean as I go when I cook, so I figure there's no reason not to do that while I'm making beer. One of the things I was thinking about was all the spent grains that got left over from this. So there's a few different things that you can do with the grains. And I mean, there's a lot of it. So anyways, I found a couple of recipes, one for spent grain dog treats, and one for turning the spent grains into flour. So I've got about 6.5 cups worth of spent grains here on the cookie sheet, and I've got my oven. I'm lucky, my oven will go very low on the warming setting, so I've got it set for 145 degrees Fahrenheit. I've also measured off about 4 cups of spent grains for dog treats. Now, a word of warning, just generally, but also specifically for dog treats. If you put hops in your grains, or if hops have come into contact with the grains at all, do not use them for dogs. Do not let dogs have hops. They are poisonous. Very, very poisonous. Do not give them hops. So yeah, that's my public safety announcement. So there's about 4 cups of grains there. So as a result, instead of having that colander full either going into the compost or the garbage, I've now got this. Might even try composting the cheesecloth just to see what happens. Might cut it up first, but hey, what the hell. Okay, so this is what's happened after the 90-minute boil, and all the hop additions are done. So at the end, once the wort was in the ice bath, I added another 16 grams of hops. So that should give me sort of the finish. The rest of the package of hops for the second ounce go in later on as dry hopping. So I was stirring it, although I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember if that was actually the wrong thing to do or not. But I know the general idea is you want to get the temperature down quickly. But I also know that you don't want to oxygenate you need to oxygenate your wort, but you also don't want to give it too much oxygen. So I don't know if I've gone a little too far the other way, but anyways, so that's pretty much it. So the next step is getting it into the carboy and adding the yeast. So I've rehydrated the yeast, which isn't actually following the instructions. It says to just add the dry yeast, but I've always had better luck with rehydrated yeast. So I took about 125 mils or so of boiled water that had cooled down to just above room temperature, added about 1/3 of the package of yeast, which were down to about 4 grams, and added it to the water just to sort of wake it up. So once the wort is added to the carboy, then the yeast will go in on top and start to do its thing.